So the LG 32GS95UE, where do they come up with these names? 4K 240Hz OLED just went on sale for pre-order, and luckily for you, I've had hands-on time with this monitor as well as the ASUS model, so I can tell you where it's good and where it's so bad you'll have to get an eyewash station. Now, the good news is it's a 4K 240Hz OLED with the ability to go up to 480Hz at 1080p, which actually looked better than normal 1080p to me thanks to the upscaling capabilities of the monitor, and as you can imagine, a 480Hz refresh rate combined with the near instantaneous response times of OLED genuinely gives you, well, near screenshot levels of motion performance, as there's almost no noticeable motion blur on that panel at that point. But let's be honest, nobody's going to actually use this monitor at 1080p regardless of how good the upscaling is. So in reality, the way most people will use this is as a 4K 240Hz OLED, which we already have with the Alienware AW3225QF, which, as a side note, is much better now that the firmware and packaging has been updated. But I digress. Sure, the inky blacks of OLED and lightning fast response times of 240Hz are excellent, but what does this monitor offer other than a goofy 1080p 480Hz mode that the Alienware doesn't? Well, three things, at least in my opinion. One good and two bad. One, higher brightness. During my time with this monitor, I did get a chance to measure brightness, and I'm happy to report that it is significantly brighter than the Quantum OLED monitors I've tested so far, at around 30% brighter in a 3% window, about 45% brighter in a 10% window, and roughly 20% brighter in a 100% window than current 4K 240Hz Quantum OLEDs, as it can do roughly 1300, 700, and 300 nits in those window sizes. This is very important for HDR impact, something that Quantum OLEDs lack in my opinion, since all the ones I've tested severely compromise full screen brightness in their peak 1000 nit mode, meaning that you should really be running them in the standard 400 to 480 nits capped mode they ship at to get the best full screen brightness, putting them well behind LG and making them somewhat incapable, at least in my opinion, of delivering a really impactful HDR scene. Now that said, OLED TVs still absolutely destroy both of these panels, so there's a lot of room for improvement when it comes to brightness, but this is definitely much better on the LG panels on monitors than Quantum OLED right now regardless. Now two, and here's where things get bad, color volume. And this is where some people say that Quantum OLED can actually look brighter than WOLED. And in my opinion, if they are somewhat close in terms of brightness, that's actually true. But in this case, the gulf between the LG and the Quantum OLED Samsung panels is so massive in terms of brightness that this really can't make up that difference. But it is still true that the Samsung Quantum OLEDs are going to have superior color volume in HDR in my testing. At least that's what's been the case, because the white subpixel in the LG OLEDs at really high brightness can wash out some of that color volume. So that is going to be a downside. And then three, the coating. And I'm going to be honest with you guys, this is a complete deal breaker. Now listen, the coating of a display is, well, arguably one of the most important aspects of that display. Not only is it in charge of handling how clear it is and how vibrant it is and how high contrast the image can look, but it's also in charge of trying to mitigate reflections and handling ambient light. And while the matte coating can, depending on your point of view, handle ambient light at least decently well, it does come at the cost of clarity, perceived contrast, and perceived vibrancy. And this coating, guys, is so grainy, so oily, and so blurry in my opinion that I just simply could not recommend anybody purchase this display for any reason. Keep in mind, I have had my hands on with this one and the ASUS, and this is true for both of them. So it seems like everybody outside of Doe, which, let's be honest, they do have a questionable history, and I certainly would not be pre-ordering anything from them. But outside of Doe, which that monitor does look really good to be fair, at least on paper with that Gorilla Glass, all the other monitors that are going to be using this panel will be using the standard matte coating, which again is horrendously grainy, especially when anything white is on the screen. And it is, I cannot tell you enough how awful it looks. Please, for the love of God, if you are considering this, do not buy one that has a matte coating, because you are going to be, I think, in my opinion, very disappointed with the clarity of this display, and I think that it also basically defeats the purpose of even getting a 4K monitor if it's going to be this grainy. If I have a constant film grain and vegetable oil filter applied to my screen at all times, why am I buying it? So I cannot recommend this to anybody. I wouldn't even recommend this at like $300 because in my opinion, it just doesn't look good. And if a monitor doesn't look good, it doesn't matter how good the technology is, how fast it is, how high contrast it is. If it doesn't look good, it's not good in my opinion. So for that reason, if you're considering this display, just don't, and I'll have some Quantum.OLEDs and some other OLED monitors linked in the description below. But I think it's time we be honest about monitors here, guys, and point customers towards monitors that actually look good. Oh yeah, and at $1,400 roughly that they're asking for this thing, what a joke. There's gonna be so many Quantum.OLEDs available in the price range between $900 to $1,200 roughly that I have no idea what they're smoking thinking they're gonna ask that. Whether you're looking to connect a new console, gaming PC, or just need a fast and reliable HDMI cable to connect over long distances, Rupro has you covered with their certified 8K HDMI 2.1 fiber optic cable available in sizes of up to 50 feet and can deliver a perfect full 48 gigabits per second connection over distances other cables could only dream of reaching. And with 48 gigabits per second of bandwidth, it can easily drive 8K 60 FPS or 4K 144 FPS 10-bit HDR video through its ultra-thin, flexible, and durable housing, and it even supports ER. So if you're in the market for a cable that can drive a beautiful new TV or monitor, be sure to check out Rupro on Amazon today.